Check the mic and make sure it sound right.
So welcome everyone to the group chat brought to you by Overmark. I'm your host Darrell. I'm excited to be back. And today joining me is Xin Wei. Xin Wei, give a shout out to our students.
Hello everyone, I'm back. I feel like I do appear on the podcast quite a bit.
Okay, anyway, for today's topic, we want to discuss habits of highly effective students. Be it is when we were students ourselves and what we have observed from our fellow peers and what the top scorers are doing, or even during our time as tutors, where we work with different students and we observe certain habits. And today we want to share those habits with you. And if it applies, hopefully you learn something and apply it so that you can improve your learning. So just to start off, Xin Wei, why is it important to learn from the best?
Why is it important to learn from the best? Because I think if it's a topic that you don't know, to start out, you have no idea, then you only can imitate, right? If you don't know. But then along the way, as you imitate, as you experience, then you can develop your own standard, your own workflow. Yeah. But for to start with, I agree. You should learn from the best.
I think adding on to what you said, right? So whenever we are discussing learning a new skill or something that we're not as familiar with, it's always good practice to try and imitate first. But imitation only goes to a certain point because you truly need to understand why are they doing certain things to truly grasp the whole idea. I think for me, this is more from sports, right? When you start off, you try to imitate the good players, but you never really understand the intrinsic, how they think and why it functions. So today, I think we want to go slightly deeper so that we're able to touch on those whys rather than just the whats. So maybe I'll start off from my own personal observation. So one thing I not observed about students that do very well is really the attitude. Okay, and I think the attitude here plays a huge difference because it is the main difference between going to class ready and going to class unprepared. So the attitude, the common saying, right? Your attitude determines your altitude. But I think that saying goes to say a lot because whether you are ready to learn when you go into class versus you are open to learning, okay, teacher say what, I listen, versus you are actively thinking of what you're hoping to gain from that lesson. I think your learning attitude really determines a lot. I think for me, one litmus test that I do with my students is whether they ask questions. If my students ask plenty of questions, as a teacher, I love it. Because it means that they are thinking, they're coming in ready with questions, they want to clarify their doubts. So if you're thinking of learning from the best, I think something that you can do is to work on your attitude towards learning, be proactive rather than to be passive, and proactively asking questions, clarifying your doubts, doing your homework. All of this, taking action, I think matters a lot when we speak about attitude. Xin Wei, what else do you observe about students then?
I think it's not finding excuses. I think it's very easy to find excuses, and it's a very natural defensive mechanism. Let's say you didn't do well for a certain exam or quiz, or and there's just a lot of people that you can blame. These people are very hard. Everyone didn't do well. The whole cohort, the teacher said that this question was just poorly attempted. But those are still excuses because it doesn't explain why you couldn't do this question. I think that it's not that they are wrong, because it may totally be true that a paper is just very difficult. It's challenging compared to O-level, compared to normal paper. That's totally fair. But I think using that as your first reaction will lead you down the wrong path, because everything to you seems like an external thing, but you never if a student always think like that, then it never check internally, could I have attempted this question better? Could I have linked to the concept that I've learned before? Could I have just used some keywords and maybe get some points? I think they are not finding excuses is quite important. I think it's a subset of attitude. Having a right attitude is not finding excuses. Yeah.
For sure, man. I think something else I like to add is that this is more for me when I was a student and I observed the top students in my class and in my school, what they do. For me, it's about the work ethic. So some days I come into class, I'm damn fired up, I wanted to learn. But some days I just sleep through class. I think the difference between those top students and myself, right? I'm not a top student, by the way. So those top students, what they did was that their work ethic was always there. Like every single tutorial, every single lesson, they complete their work. Every single lesson, they make sure to listen. There's always that sort of consistency. There's never an off day for them, right? Because they know that it is about compounding your work over a long period of time. It's not really about the last sprint, but it's about the consistent running, like more of a marathon for them. Rather than for me, it's like last minute work. I try to like overtake them by sprinting at the last moment, but I will never catch up. So for me, it's a lot of me learning that the work ethic goes a long way, about doing your work over time and accumulating that sort of work ethic. I think it really helps go a long way. So Xin Wei, any other thing that you observe that you think you want to share with the students?
I think they're just very motivated. Those work ethics come very internally, because if it's something that like externally, right, it's like us lah, like you will get motivated some days, but some days you're like so I think finding that intrinsic motivation is maybe what like motivated those students. But I thought it's quite hard as well, because as a student there are definitely days where you just like, oh my god, get me out of here.
I know what you mean though. So when we touch on a topic on extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, I trust that for most of our listeners, if you're already in secondary school, your parent giving you some extrinsic motivation doesn't really help. Like in primary school, okay, I buy you a game like a Xbox, PlayStation, then you study hard, you work. But after a certain point, you need to realize that it has to move away from that. You need to do it for yourself. I think when we talk about intrinsic motivation, it's about finding a reason why. So if your reason is that you want to go to a certain JC, a certain uni course, a certain poly course, I think knowing that pursuing the choice that you want to make should be a strong enough intrinsic motivation to keep you going. Now, whether you're able to sustain it every single day, I think is something that you eventually have to build, telling yourself that there is no off days, not giving yourself the excuse to say no, right? So I think all of this all comes into play. But I think to summarize, right, what we really see from these top students is really the attitude, their work ethic, the fact that they know where their end goal is and being highly motivated. So all of this comes with character development as well. We're not saying that they just born like that, right? Nobody's born like that. But it's about the experiences that you go through, the small incremental habits that you build that eventually get you to who you are, right? So we're not saying that you can do it instantly, but try to keep these good habits long enough that it becomes permanent until it becomes part of yourself. Then that's when you can lean a bit more towards the higher performing, highly effective students already. Okay. Something else that I think I personally would like to share is that you remember at the start of the podcast, we were talking about imitation, right? So we try to imitate what the students do.
Yeah.
But you kind of need to learn that everybody's style is different. You kind of need to learn what is your own learning style. So I know something that works for these top students might not work for you. So as much as you imitate, you don't have to copy wholesale, but maybe take the good points that apply for you and then look at another student and see what they're doing. And then take a few points that suit yourself. So I think you kind of need to customize all of this to make it work for you. So I share one small example. So I know a lot of students like to go to cafes or libraries to study because they find that the environment is better, right? And I know a lot of top students, they will do the same thing, right? So maybe some of you are thinking that, oh, I have to go to a library to study well. But think about it. If your house is like nice and you sort of have a study desk and it's a clearly demarcated zone away from your bedroom, actually studying at home helps with saving a lot of time. So for myself, I was actually okay with studying at home. I didn't need to go out. And in fact, when I go out and study with my friends, I tend to get distracted even more. And traveling time and all, overall, it has a pros and cons, but I realized that wasn't something that really what was needed for me. So when I went to university, I actually studied most of the time inside my own room, and I found it to be just as effective as going to the library to study. So I didn't force that habit that most of them took and force it upon myself, because for me it works. So I did what I felt was necessary. So I felt like no need to force it unless it really suits you. Is there such an occurrence for you too?
You know what, Darrell? We are exactly the same. I don't study in groups. I don't study outside, which is very rare with my group of friends, because often a lot of people like to, even in uni, there are those classrooms that like it's just like everyone go there to study kind, like super quiet, aircon and things like that. But I never like to go there. I just like to be on my own table and in my own room. And I think that works for me. Yes, so I think the key is research, like it's trying out though, because you never know. You just have you do have to try a few times. I did try to go down to like those cafes, go down to those classrooms and try to study in groups a few times and realize that ultimately there's one good thing. I think trying out is very important, and do that early. Like don't like exam ready then go and try a few options. Like try to do that early and then find a good environment for yourself. Yeah.
I think moving on from the part that learning to suit yourself, a learning style that suits you, the next point I wanted to touch on is more of like, it's good to learn from the rest, like the good students, but don't necessarily compare and feel inferior, right? So I think it's a very common tendency to compare, especially in Singapore's education system that's predicated on a bell curve. It's literally there to make you fight against your peers. But I feel you don't have to put that pressure, in a sense that it's good to compare and strive to catch up, but don't put yourself down because of it, right? So comparison, I do feel it is unhealthy. If you were to ask me, I say it's best not to compare at all, but look at your own incremental improvement, right? If you're failing right now, getting a B4 in your next exam is freaking good because you improved by 2 grades. But if you compare with the person that's getting A1 and top in class, you will feel like shit, like it's getting A1 and getting B4, right? So comparing, there's a certain limit that you have to stop at, right? So if you're looking and learning from the best, don't fall into the rabbit hole of constantly comparing and feeling inferior. You are running your own race, you're living your own life. Try not to think of what others have achieved as your benchmark. Set your own benchmark, and you'll realize that your life and the stress that comes along with it will change drastically.
Yeah, I think I would like to add on to that as well. When we were talking, when Darrell told me that we want to talk about this like habits of highly effective students, I think I'm very wary of like adding this point of like, the benchmark of highly effective students is not getting like necessary like you must score straight A's. I don't think that is the goal. Like I think if people have listened to like two of us talking, right? I think as much as we want our students to do well in exam, that's why we are here. But we don't fault anyone, or we don't like say like, oh, you're gonna fail if you don't get straight A's. Like that's not our ideology. Like definitely not. We believe that there are like many routes, and getting straight A is just one of it, and it's not the most superior one, right? So while we say like learn from the best and everything, but it's not like forcing yourself to like achieve the same thing. It's getting, it's your own standard. Did you feel productive today? Do you feel like you tried your best today? I'm sure there are days where you study for 3 hours and you realize that nothing went into your mind, and that is, or like you study for 3 hours and you realize that the 3 hours there was just like constant distraction. But that's not what we want. That's what we're trying to like avoid here. So yes, don't compare and just set your own standard.
I think it's about being the best version of yourself, right? So it's really not about like I have to top the class, I have to get straight A's. It's about doing the best that you can. So I know that like at the end of the day, me and Xin Wei can testify that your results, they only matter to a certain point. I think it does matter in terms of getting you to the next step, right?
Yeah.
Like O-level get you to JC or poly, then from there you want to go to uni get to a job. But you realize it's endless, right? You will never finish all these tests, right? But more importantly is that every single step of the way, you can look back and tell yourself that I have no regrets because I've already done my best. And I think one of the ways to ensure that you reach your full potential is by learning from the best. I think that's what we're trying to say. And I think another point in terms of how these students are usually very effective, I realize that they have very, very good time management, right?
Yes.
Time is a resource. Everybody has 24 hours. How you decide to use it changes drastically, right? So beside you is a top student, beside you there's another top student. They have the exact same amount of time, right? But what is it that they're doing differently? For me, it's really about time management. And that brings me to one of the more fundamental discussion between needs and wants, right? So I want to socialize with my friends, Do I need to? Sometimes I do think you need to, right? Because you don't want to just live your entire school life just being a mugger. I don't think that's about it. So
Yeah, that's
sometimes,
that.
right, if it's really your friend's birthday or your friend is feeling down and you need to be there for them, I think it's a need. Go for it. But there are certain instances where you can clearly classify it as a want, right? That you want to go to the movies before your exam, but you can change that, still go to the movies with your friend, but maybe after the exam, right? So when we are thinking of needs and wants, I don't think it's binary. I think sometimes there's a bit of like a gray area. Like you feel like you want to watch Netflix, but in a way, your body kind of needs the rest. So it's very hard to differentiate between the two. But I think learning to be able to make a good call on what's a need and what's a want can go a long way, not only in academics, but in life. Because once you decide what is necessary, what's important, then you can really put more time and thought into that and focus on that. So time management really plays a big role. I just wanted to elaborate a bit more on the aspect of sleep. So I know some students feel like
It's important.
right, you might feel guilty for sleeping too much, or you think that I can cut back on sleep. I strongly discourage that. So if you are like me, right, I'm a person that really needs my sleep, right? And if I don't sleep, I go to school, I end up sleeping. So I might as well just sleep sufficiently. So for me, I really try to allocate time to rest properly so that I'm recharged for the day, so that I'm able to sustain. But in order to do that, I need to make sure that I make time, like I complete work ahead of time and stuff so that I get sufficient rest. So I would say don't compromise on sleep.
When I see time management, right, other than the needs and wants, another word that I think of is discipline. I think time management is like very tightly linked to discipline, and discipline is really like probably one of the most powerful characteristic of a highly effective student, because you do need the discipline to stick to what you plan out, right? And so assuming that you have a plan and you need to have the discipline to like stick to that plan, and I think many students, maybe the challenges that they will see is that they set like, okay, I study for 1 hour, but before that 1 hour ends, they're like, oh my god, I want to look at my phone, I want to go and, I don't know, scroll TikTok, I want to go look at like videos, which is totally fair. I mean, I definitely have those times as well, but it's there's a few ways to do this. Like I think some people are just like naturally motivated, they just like very in control, they just have a lot of strength to like not give up and so motivated to go and achieve their goals. That's good, right? I think build that. If you can, you really build that kind of habit. But if you cannot, then you go and like take away all those distractions. What I did when I was a student, I switch off my phone when I study. I will switch it off, and then of course during my break I will switch it on. And then let's say I set myself a 15 minutes break. I switch it on during that 15 minutes. But okay, I end up like using it for more than 15 minutes. But at least during that like 3 to 4 hours, I'm like out of distraction. I cannot, because it's off. And it takes a lot of energy to go and switch it on. And you know, when you're waiting for your phone to switch on, you'll be like, you will be so aware that you're breaking the rule that you set for yourself. And I did feel ashamed of myself when I break the rule that I set for myself, right? And I think that kind of, just some example, but if you are not strong enough to like control, like inner strength to control yourself, then you set like those external barrier. Yeah, I think discipline, if you can be a very disciplined person during that, maybe when you are sec 3, sec 4, or even just like, you know, of course give yourself a break, but if you can stay disciplined, I think that's very important as well.
I think one thing that comes to mind is like you work hard but you play hard, you know? So it means like when you're studying, you really study. Then when you're playing, just let go, right? Then like, try not to always be stuck in the middle. I think this nicely bridges to the last portion of our podcast, which is, Xin Wei, what's one personal effective study habit that has helped you? Maybe you can share yours and I can share mine as well.
Mine is planning. Okay, I think because just now I already shared about my tips already, right? Like I switch off my phone, right? Another one is that I plan my schedule like quite detailed, but I'm not a perfectionist. I think if you are a perfectionist and you try to you plan your time, you're gonna waste hell lot of time planning, and that is bad. Like some people spend like, I don't know, they're like super long coming up with a plan, drawing a very nice table. That's just not gonna work. I plan, but I'm also flexible. So I actually list out the chapters that I want to get on today and like every other day leading up to exam. But I'm also flexible during like around it, because I don't want to like spend 2 hours just trying to plan out my schedule and everything like that. Yeah, so I think that um the habit of planning, but as well as being flexible along the way, have helped me a lot. But not so flexible that you can always break your rules. Like I have 4 chapters, but today I only get on to 2 and I bring that 2 around. Of course, that is not the correct way, because that means that you'll never finish your plan. But yeah, I think planning and being flexible is important.
For me, there's really quite a few. I don't know whether to categorize it as effective or not, but I think something that worked for me, especially in JC, I won't call it a studying habit, right? But it's more of I always force myself to have a study buddy. To me, that was really important. So there was this friend that we always study together with, right? And then it's like we keep each other in check, and we say, oh, we'll go to the library at this time, we'll study. You know, you can't leave early because you can't pangsay your friend, right? So you're forced to be there, and then you go through the process. You can go for lunch and dinner together. You know, you're just keeping each other in check, staying motivated. Then, you know, if you all study the same subjects, even better, because you can ask each other questions. So I won't consider that a study habit, but I thought it was a strategy that was highly effective for me, especially in a high stress environment in JC. In uni, right, my technique was a bit different. I think I shared earlier in the podcast, I was able to study in my own dorm, right? Like in my own room. Something that was effective for me in uni was that I was early. So back then in secondary school and JC, I was very last minute. Everything I pushed to the end, then I studied the night before, stuff like that. In uni, I took a radically different approach. The moment they told us our assignments at the start of the semester, I already started working on it. So actually, my assignments in uni is very common. Like they click submit, right? Like 5 minutes before the assignment, right?
Two,
I was
three,
never like
five,
that.
nine.
I literally submit the night before and then I go to sleep because I have already finished everything early. So actually, if you are listening to this right now and you're in O level, you're taking A level soon, what we can mean by early is that if your test is on Wednesday, maybe finish revising it by the weekend. If the homework is due on Friday, maybe finish it by Wednesday. There's nobody telling you that you can only finish it on Thursday. That's the logic that I never understood. And I think if you're early for everything, this study habit can really go a long way because it creates a lot of buffer and prevents last minute and unproductive work.
I think what I'm seeing, like for both your secondary strategy and your secondary school strategy and uni strategy, right, is being accountable. Like being accountable to yourself. Okay, one is being accountable to your friend, and then another one is being accountable for yourself. And I think that's very important. I think students who can go into an exam without learning all the content really need to reflect for future exam that how can you have let that happen? Like if you started early, or if you just force yourself to like you just have to finish all chapter, that would never happen. Like you will never go into an exam not knowing one topic. So you have to leave a whole question blank or things like that. I think being accountable to yourself is quite important. If you can't be accountable to yourself, find someone to be accountable to, like willingly and then be accountable to each other. And I think that will help. That will go a long way. That's a good habit, very good habit to be accountable, even in life.
I got a very stupid analogy, but you guys hear if it sounds out, okay? So imagine you're going to Squid Game, right? Would you not prepare for all the games beforehand, especially you know what games are coming out? That's literally like the exam, right? Okay, the only difference is that the participants in Squid Game, they were gonna die if they failed, but you're not gonna die, which is why you're like, whatever, I can fail this test, fail this exam. But I feel like something, if you want to think about, is there was this quote that really motivated me. If you are as motivated as when you are like drowning in water and you want that last breath of fresh air, no matter what, you're going to get that breath of fresh air, right? Because you need to survive, right? So survival is like such a primal instinct that will motivate you to do anything. So sometimes for me, what I try to put myself through is I try to not downplay, right? I try to upplay and put myself up to the challenge in a way that, you know, if it's an exam, you know, it's like Squid Game, you know, it's like the literal contest. If you don't survive, you literally die. then I think that's a good way to put your mental state and how to keep yourself motivated. Of course, that feels kind of stressful, but what I'm trying to convey here is that if you want to be accountable or if you want to be motivated, a lot of it comes from inside. Sometimes it's about finding ways to motivate yourself, or like, oh, I'm going to buy a Chatter's cake after I'm studying how many hours. That's one way. Or you can just find another reason, like if I don't get into the uni course that I want to, I would really hate to go into this other course. Sometimes it's about playing with the psychology in your head. And I think at the end of the day, if you want to be a highly effective student or highly effective person, think more about the character development aspect of yourself, away from the academic rigor that we've always been, focusing on. It's not really about the subject, the topic, the education system. It's about yourself. So find time to improve yourself incrementally but steadily. And I think that will go a long way. Xin Wei, anything to add before we end off?
Yeah, that sounds correct. And I think there are two kinds of students. One is like they already like upplay everything, then they're very stressed. So that kind, you need to, you need to manage your own expectation for those. But there are people who are too relaxed. Let's be honest. Maybe some students, like, I think what Darrell said would help a bit. Like, take it more seriously. And there will be like more motivation to do things. Yeah.
Yep. And with that, we come to the end of today's podcast. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please follow us. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate that like. And also leave us a comment on what topics you'd like us to discuss next. If not, we'll see everybody in the next podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It sound right, boy.